Welcome into the Tour Coach, everybody. I am your host, Tony Ruggiero, as I am each and every week. Myself and Jackson Court occasionally jumps in as well and provides you with a conversation with somebody from around the world of golf. These discussions, these conversations, these roundtable chats and fireside talks all come from our travels in and around the world of golf, whether it's here in Mobile, Alabama, in my office and studio, or down where I teach primarily at Old Palm Golf Club in Palm Beach Gardens, or whether it's out at the Live Tour, PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, LPGA Tour, Epson Tour, wherever it is we travel in the world of golf. These are the people that I find informative, interesting, funny, great information, anything that can help you understand, teach, or play the game of golf better. That's what my goal has always been, from the Dew Sweepers all the way through the Tour Coach, and want to invite all of you to continue listening. We've got some great content out. Please check out Dew Sweeper TV on YouTube. That's Dew Sweeper TV on YouTube. I am blown away by the number of folks that continue to watch and our content, and the Pro Work series is alive and well. We've just put one out recently. We got another one coming out soon in another week, which takes you inside the ropes, behind the scenes, and lets you really get a sense for how I work with all the different teammates that we have as we continue to focus on developing the next level of talent and helping people play their best golf. So check out our Dew Sweeper TV on YouTube. I appreciate the support. Continue to listen to the Tour Coach here. Please like and subscribe and share it as we continue to grow the Dew Sweeper movement, and would encourage all of you to come see us for one of our retreats through the summer or into the fall down at Old Palm Golf Club, or we've got one in August up at Bluebell as well. And come hang out and improve at the game of golf. And now that I'm a tequila man, come hang out afterwards. We'll tape a little podcast and you can drink an epic Western with me. There's no better drink I am finding to relax with, chill with, whether it's on the water, on the boat, fishing, or hanging out after a good day on the tee. That's Epic Western. Enjoy this episode of the Tour Coach. Thanks for joining us here for the Golf Coach Development page, as well as the Tour Coach podcast. With me is Jackson Court. And Kevin Kirk is our special guest this evening, so appreciate everybody taking time out of their day. Before we jump into that, Justin Parsons was scheduled to be on as he normally is, but there was an unexpected death in his family for him and his wife, Cheryl, so our thoughts are with them, but he won't be joining us this evening. But we are fortunate to have a good friend of mine, one of the great teachers in the game. He's the list of players he's taught is pretty impressive, but also one of the very best I've ever been around at looking at the science side, combining that with a practical way to apply things. And really impressive to me is his ability to kind of look at players and figure out the areas of their game that need improvement to excel at the level they are. I've always enjoyed the opportunity to sit, have dinner, and pick his brain on that. So Kevin, thanks for joining us. And we got a great group of young teachers here, and of course, people listening to us all over. Appreciate you sitting in, and you guys on the Zoom call. Fire some questions at Jackson as well. But Kevin, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate you guys having me on, and looking forward to the next 30 or 45 minutes with you.
I wanted to start here with we've talked about this before, not on a podcast, but like when a player or a student comes to you, where do you start with the player, and how do you figure out where it is you need to go with that player to help them succeed and excel?
Well, I think, for me, I've got to sit down and spend a little time trying to get caught up with them. So my first meeting with the player is always just trying to figure out where they've been and where they're trying to go. So I always start with just sit down and just tell me your golf story. I want to hear how it got started and take me through it, because all that is going to be relevant to kind of what we're going to be doing today and possibly going forward. And sometimes the solutions aren't going forward. Sometimes the solutions are backwards. Sometimes you got to try to go back, and if somebody was playing good at a period of time, I know that's what Chris Cuomo did with Tiger. He just went back and said, "Hey, listen, we don't need to go forward here. Let's go backwards and go back to this time when you were on top of it, and let's go start with that and see if we can kind of revisit that." So So for me, it's always just trying to take that, let them tell me their golf story, and then from there we can start figuring out what assessments we need to do and where to go from there.
And I think that's one, it's brilliant, but I think that's a great lesson for people taking lessons as well as young people giving lessons. I think sometimes there's this rush to film them, get data, and just jump in there, start telling them to change something without ever really taking the time to listen about where they're coming from. I like to pick guys' brains I like to ask them who they've worked with growing up and coming up, right? Yeah. Like that gives you an inside kind of look at maybe some of the things that have probably worked before or didn't work before, right? I think that it's a big part of the process.
So I recently had a kid that showed up on my doorstep here about had been on a really good track, as playing some really good junior golf, and then suddenly derailed, and nobody could figure it out, and he started losing confidence, and so I sat down and talked to him. I said, well, take me through what happened, and when you were playing good up to this point in time, and then what happened, and well, I didn't really change much, and I said, did you get any new golf clubs? He goes, yeah, I did. I said, okay. I said, did you take the time to make sure those things the loss and lies were checked, specifically the lie angles? Yeah, they were checked. I said, I tell you, why don't you bring those clubs out here and let's just take a look at them. They were 3 degrees more upright. And all of a sudden, so this kid goes from, this pattern of hitting great shots and being able to, have this club that's interacting with the golf ball and the turf correctly, to a golf club that's 3 degrees upright, hits a few shots offline, and then starts thinking that it's him, right? Now, it's not always the arrow, but sometimes it is, right? So, So I think in this particular kid's case, I said, well, let's shelf those other clubs. Let's hit a few with these. All of a sudden, his pattern straightened up, flushed it, got it back online. I said, you can play with those, but you're gonna have to go get them bent. And lesson for you: anytime you have new equipment, you make sure you take them and you watch the guy match them to those specs.
Yeah, it's critical. I've had that happen too recently with a guy at Old Palman. I mean, the lie angles were 3-4 degrees off, and he struggling, couldn't figure out what was wrong, and it was the irons.
Yeah. So sometimes it's the arrow, Tony.
Yeah, it's always nice when it's not our fault. Right. Rarely, that's a rare exception. But what about, you're one of those teachers to me that's always driven to learn. You keep pushing yourself to understand new things. Talk a little bit about that, and what are the areas that fascinate you and where you see teaching going nowadays?
Well, I think, there's so much to learn about golf. I mean, you start looking at all the different angles that you can approach it from. You can approach it from a geometric perspective. You can approach it from a physics perspective. You can approach it from an anatomy and physiology perspective. You can approach it from a neuroscience perspective. And there's so many different lanes and different ways you can approach it. So for me, the fascinating part was to try to kind of, get on those spokes and then try to learn enough about those things where I could have at least a decent understanding of how those things fit together. And I think, over my lifetime, I've really, gone out and chased it down. I mean, back when you and I first started teaching, Tony, and the only way you could do that is you had to get on an airplane or you had to go find somebody and spend time with them. And today with the internet, it's pretty easy to figure out what you or me or anybody else in the world is doing with teaching. And so it's a lot easier. One of the things that I did a couple of years ago that helped me probably more than anything was I took an anatomy and physiology course online, and I started trying to figure out how the body worked. I'm a movement-based coach to begin with, and it really helped me understand, how the body actually wants to move. And so it helped me clarify some of the things that I was trying to kind of do relative to pivot mechanics, hip loading, the way the feet interact with the ground, the shoulder joints, things like that I just didn't know. I mean, I had thought about it and kind of looked at it, try to surmise what I felt was happening. But it wasn't until I actually kind of got a chance to study that and then started talking to some of the biomechanics about, what is really happening, and that I was able to kind of start, making some headway in terms of improving movement quality, not just motion and club motion.
And what I'm gonna say, tell me if you think I'm crazy here or wrong.
Well, you're crazy. So we're going to shelf that.
I said that, I knew where the hell you were going. But I think that, like, if you're a younger instructor starting out now, right? Like, I think you're going to have to develop some understanding of the fitness of the body side or biomechanics if you want to be able to coach and teach at the high level. I mean, I think that the age where teachers don't have an understanding of that is passing us by. And if I was a student looking for a teacher, I probably wouldn't want to go to a teacher that didn't have an understanding of one of those two things either. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, there's when you start looking at disciplines like biomechanics and you start looking at some of the, the ground force production and things like that, I think it's important for us as coaches to at least have an understanding and working knowledge. We don't have to be an expert in it. I mean, for example, I outsource all my biomechanics. I don't do it. I'm gonna call an expert in if I need to give a good biomech reading, because I don't want to, it'd be like going to a surgeon and having me show up to kind of do the surgery. That probably wouldn't be great. So if in specialty situations, what I will do is I will definitely call an expert in and have them kind of come give me an assessment or a reading to when I'm trying to understand that. I think that specifically in the biomechanic domain, I think there's a lot of coaches that fancy themselves as being pretty good at that, but they're not as good as a good biomechanist. And so I think it's always best to hire somebody that's got a background in golf to kind of come in and do the readings and help you formulate some sort of idea about how you're gonna operate going forward. So I'm into outsourcing in a lot of those areas, and then there's a few things that I'm pretty good at, so I try to stay in my lane and do my thing.
That's what I've tried to do with Colby and Scotland and some of the folks that we've surrounded ourselves with, people that have those answers. Jackson, you got a question?
Yeah. Do you mind sharing who you outsource some of that stuff with?
Yeah, Mark Bull's my guy for all my biomech stuff. I've been around him a long time, and I really appreciate his approach. I mean, he is so bright and so smart, but he has the capacity to sit and help the coach, not try to hijack the direction that things are going. And so he's got the capacity to sit down, do an assessment, and then he talks it over with the coach before he ever talks to the player, which I think is brilliant. I mean, I think that one of the problems that we get into in today's world is that, you haul a biomechanist in here, he starts talking a bunch of stuff, and next thing you know, you've got the athlete looking at you, scratching his head, trying to figure out what just happened, right? So
yeah, that's my pet peeve. Jackson and I actually talked about this on the phone earlier. My pet peeves are club fitters, 3D people, and biomechanic people that hijack the lesson and start teaching it for you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think having people that are disciplined,
and I know all of them.
Yeah, competent and disciplined. So you just have to find people that you like, right? And some of it's personality based. I like Mark because he's calm. I don't want somebody in there that's bringing out. These people that show up are already a little bit on the edge anyway. So I don't need more energy. I need somebody to help calm the space down, move through it. Okay, this is how we're gonna approach it, and we'll kind of slowly start moving down that river.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that's not brought up a lot. Everybody just talks about the info, but the personality and the fit within your team, I think, is a big deal too. There's lots of people that are great at all these disciplines, but you got to find a guy or girl or whatever that matches, how you teach, and just the vibe and everything's equally as important, I think, because I've had students in there trying to get better, and then another person comes in and it's a totally different vibe, and they're like, what the hell,
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about kind of watching you teach, Tony, is, I mean, the tribe that you run with, I mean, you guys there's an energy about it that's and I mean, it makes people want to, stay in there and try to kind of get better. So, I mean, you get the energy and the connection that you guys have with each other. I mean, I think that's super important when you start trying to assemble a group of coaches around in a coaching environment, or trying to assemble a group of people around a player.
Jackson, you got any more questions?
Yeah, I'm going to shoot one that was emailed in, and then I've got a couple follow-up questions from a time we had Italian dinner at Nazzaro's on St. Simon's. You remember that, T?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
Food's good there, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that was that place that I dug. That place is like, you'd never think about going there. And we were the youngest people in there by 32 years.
There's no doubt. Yeah. And we definitely made the most noise for sure. So.
One question One question is, what do you do when practice and stats improve, but tournament scores do not?
I think that, when you start kind of looking at kind of the disconnect between statistical information and performance, a lot of that has to do with, being able to help the players kind of, you almost have to kind of go out and watch them play and figure out where the disconnect is. I don't think you can figure that out from the driving range or from, behind your TrackMan or behind your camera. You have to go out and watch them play and figure out what the disconnect is. And sometimes it's a strategy thing. They're making bad decisions. Sometimes it's a high variance miss where your stats can look good, but three times around they hit it 50 yards offline, can't find it, And so, the stats could say, oh gosh, you're hitting all these fairways, but it doesn't take into consideration that high magnitude miss that turns a bogey, turns a 4.5 into a 7, And so I do think that kind of getting out and watching people play, watching the decisions they make, watching their risk reward, scenarios that they're willing to take on, and helping them understand a little bit more about, what is a high percent, what's a high percentage shot look like? Okay, let's if we want to try to shoot lower scores, we got to base it on percentage, not what's possible. So, taking, for example, the rule that I use with most of my high performance guys and really players of all levels, if you're getting ready to take this shot on from here to that target, and you take 10 shots from me, it's not what, the question is not whether you can do it, because you probably can. It's within the spectrum of possibility. But what doesn't take into consideration, a lot of times people will make their decision on the shot they're getting ready to play on, is it possible? And what they should be making that decision is it probable, right? So if you took 10 shots from here, now what's going to happen? Well, can you get 7 out of 10 of them into that area trying to kind of get the golf ball? If so, it's a go, right? If not, you need to kind of have a think and try to either move the target, change the club, or try to find something that's a little bit easier. Because what you see, particularly with junior golfers, is they'll take on a 1 out of 10 shot in a heartbeat. And so a lot of times that's what happens. They got a high magnitude miss. They don't understand risk reward scenarios, and just by cleaning those two things up, the stats should start kind of lining up with the way the score rolls out.
No, that's awesome. That's gold right there. Jackson, follow up. I was just going to say, before Jackson gets into his questions are always better than mine. So I'll go first. But how do you help them improve their practice so that it gets better on the golf course? What are some of the things? I've watched you with girls down at Doral. You spend a lot of time with them, helping them practice. I feel like, I think that's unbelievable. One of the things I respect, you're not just a swing coach. You're trying to coach them to perform better. How do you help them practice better?
Well, I think, practice, is I think most practice that you see players do is mildly productive, but a lot of times it's not moving the needle. So how are you going to move the needle in golf? You have to start thinking about, it's really about not developing necessarily perfect technique, but it's about ball control, being able to control your golf ball, right? So can you control the ball? And so on the green, can you make enough putts inside 12 feet, to shoot the scores you want? Can you avoid 3 putts, around the greens? Can you chip the golf ball on the green and putt it, get it in the hole, and, up and down enough, right? Can you hit a wedge shot close enough within the proximities of the within the confines of the proximity that based on the scores you're trying to shoot? And then the same thing kind of goes for long approach and tee shots. So it's building not only kind of the swing mechanics and the mechanics for all the skills, but also helping them understand, okay, if you're trying to hit the ball into a cone out there, 5% of the distance, right? Well, we need to practice that. You need to figure out what that looks like. You need to develop a process that allows you to do that. And you need to develop the competence on the practice tee so when you go on the golf course, you feel relatively certain that it's going to show up. Because if they can't control the golf ball, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can talk about perfect alignments and ground force and keeping the TrackMan super happy, but if they can't control their golf ball on the golf course, it doesn't matter.
At all.
In my mind, it does not matter.
How often do you find a student is way off when they tell you what they think they need to work on it as far as practice part of their game? And I can almost say that, like, I think almost the better the player, sometimes the further they are off. I mean, I think their ego and things play roles in that. How do you find that?
Well, I think that, the easiest way to do it is, there's math involved in golf. So if you want to shoot a certain score, there's certain benchmarks that you have to be able to hit to shoot certain scores, right? So one of the things that I use that as I took on board a statistician named Stuart Leong. I think he's on the call tonight, but he's from Australia. He had a program called Shots to Hole, and that really helped me, you know, gather some data for these players to help them see what they were doing versus what they thought, what they thought, what they needed to be doing. And then really in terms of if there was a delta, how much would that affect it if you got that corrected? All right. So for example, chipping the ball, 2-3 feet closer has a much bigger impact than hitting a really good hybrid. I mean, that's what the math would suggest. So I think once you kind of get the stats organized, you can look at the low hanging fruit and figure out, okay, these things right here are going to lower your score. Now, if you want to hit that hybrid better, we can work on that. But if you're really seriously interested in lowering your score, you need to be looking over here. Because a lot of times it's not where you or the player thinks it is.
Jackson, follow up.
Okay. So when we were at Nazaro's, you were talking about maturation phases and the difference between male and female and when they happen. Because I have another follow-up question to that. But do you mind sharing a little bit about
Sure.
that again and how that plays into your junior development and coaching?
Yeah, so if we start looking at kind of youth development, I mean, I took a pretty deep dive off into long-term athlete development, and I started studying the work of a guy named Isfan Bali, and he was the guy that coined the term long-term athlete development, and the ADM that we use today in golf is really a spin-off of the work that he did. But it was really trying to figure out, how to kind of watch kids develop, right, and try to do things that were developmentally appropriate. So you can't ask a 9-year-old, right, to do things that a 17-year-old can do, all right? But we do it all the time. Right? You go out and you can watch people give lessons. I mean, we're asking little people to do things that big people do. We're asking girls to do things that guys are doing. We're asking people that are developmentally kind of, a slow developer, to do something that an early developer is doing. And so, studying all that was really helpful. And one of the things that came out of that, there's two kind of interesting things, actually a lot of things, but the two things that are relevant to this conversation. Number one is the girls are developing faster than the guys, and that's always been the case. So if you start looking at the developmental phases, the girls are probably 1 to 2 years ahead of the guys always, just in terms of and it makes sense. I mean, probably from just an evolutionary perspective. I mean that the girls would have to mature a little bit earlier than the guys, right? So I think you start kind of looking at the developmental phases. I'll send you guys a copy of a document that's got it all documented pretty well, and it's easy to kind of look at and start kind of figuring out, okay, well, if I've got a group of 7 to 9-year-old boys, what am I going to do with them, right? So I think or what have I got and so one of the things they also kind of talked about pretty extensively there was that the idea of physical literacy pre-puberty is probably a bigger thing than trying to develop a lot of specific golf skill. So you look at the players that are emerging out on the tour, the Brooks Koepkas of the world, the DJs. These kids were like phenomenal athletes, and then they got into golf post-puberty. They didn't play much golf before puberty, right? I mean, they played, but it wasn't like it was their primary thing. So early specialization is probably not a good idea. I mean, an 8-year-old world champion is probably the worst idea in my mind on the planet. And we have people pursuing that, with full steam ahead. And I think for coaches, upskilling yourself and understanding what those developmental pathways look like is super important. I mean, and I'll send a document out to you guys. You guys can distribute it. But I think for me, it was probably it's helped me more than anything in terms of it's been my kind of decision making. When I need to make decisions about building a program for a group of kids or a kid or trying to kind of build a 3-year program, trying to anticipate how that's going to roll out. Having that available and knowing kind of roughly what to do has been. I mean, I would tell you that changed the way I saw the world for sure.
That's great.
So with the maturation phases in guys, what were there 2 windows correct?
So if you kind of start looking at those windows, they go um, um, from 0 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 11, 11 to 13, 13 to 15, so all the way up to 24. And they're in
Okay.
roughly these 2 to 3 year blocks, right? So, and it's interesting because for example, the sport scientist, the guy that wrote this document is a sports scientist, and he comes from the Olympic world. So in their mind, an Olympic, you can be a junior Olympian through your 23rd year. All right. So that what that basically says is that, full physical maturity, according to the sports scientist, doesn't happen until you're 23, 24. That's when all the bones, all the muscles, the nervous system, all of it's finally done growing, finally done growing, right? So to try and some kids get there quicker than others, right? So the problem that we get into is with the kids that I coach, I tell them I'm not really too concerned. I just want to make sure when you wake up on your 24th birthday, you got the right tools in your kit. All right. And so let's not fast track this. We don't have to make you a world champion and this year, but let's work towards that and make sure that you have the right skill set when so when you wake up on that 24th birthday, you got the right tools in your kit to be able to go do that if that's what you want to do.
I got a question just shot in. What is the name of the person who did the research on the developmental stages? That was I'll let you answer.
Istvan Bali, Balyi.
Perfect. And then if Stuart could also share a link for his shots to hole, that would be
Yep.
great. Do you find with juniors when they say they're 25, 26, it's worth looking at technical aspects from before, maybe pre 18 even to compare swings, or is that a dangerous thing sometimes?
I think it's interesting if you watch kids that kind of go from, let's say, post puberty. Puberty really changes the way people move a lot. I mean, their bones grow, the muscles get tight, they get more strength, and so if you watch a kid pre-puberty, post puberty, it almost never really matches up. So it's really post puberty that you start kind of looking at these swings. And one of the things that I've seen is that once a kid starts moving a certain way post puberty, there's always going to be some of that in their movement. It's just the way they like to move. The way and some of it, for example, with some players when they were young and they were having to develop force, they use, they'll push off the ground and tug the handle and do a bunch of things that they used to use. And when they go bad, as adults, even when they get 24, 25, 26, a lot of times you'll see that same stuff emerge. It's just the way they like to move. It's the way their brain's organized around developing force and applying force to a golf ball. So I think that, being able to kind of figure out, everybody's kind of got a golf DNA or a golf fingerprint. And I think our job is to figure out what that fingerprint is and just try to make that a little better, try to improve that. The only time that I get off into really trying to kind of repattern things in a real significant manner is if I've got somebody who's going to hurt themselves swinging a golf club, or if I've got some time, But
Sure.
in most cases, I do try to be respectful of the players when they come in. They've been good players. They've already generated good enough scores. Sometimes, that all they may need to do is get rid of a high magnitude miss and chip and putt a little bit better, you look at Jim Furyk. I mean, I guarantee I'd have ruined him for sure. If he'd walked in my office. So you got to take time to kind of to be able to kind of watch them. See how competent they really are. Can they control the golf ball with what they're doing? And if they can control the golf ball with what they're doing, hit it far enough and not hurt themselves, then my job is to figure that out and how to support that and not I don't have to put my fingerprints all over it.
That's awesome. Kev, this was great. Thank you again for taking the time. And Jackson, do we have any more questions on the feed?
I think we're all good, T.
That was awesome, Kevin. I appreciate you taking your time. I know you're busy out there. We need to do it again. And just a little heads up to everybody. We're planning to do a teaching summit somewhere in the first couple of weeks of October down at Old Palm, working on the details of that. It's going to be very interactive where you have the opportunity to kind of spend some time up close and personal with folks like Kevin. I know Kevin is going to be involved, Wayne, myself, JP, Jackson. We're going to ask some of the cool old timers to come talk and hang out as well. So should be fun. But Kev, I appreciate your time and look forward to having dinner with you soon.
Me too, Tony. Thanks. And while I've got you on the phone, I just want to stop and thank you for all the stuff you do for all the teachers on the planet. I mean, nobody kind of, beats the drum more tirelessly about trying to kind of help these young coaches than you do. And I want to just acknowledge you for that, let you know how much I appreciate you. And I appreciate you guys letting me be on your spend time with you today. So.
All right. Thanks so much for saying that, Kev. You're the best. We'll have some fun down there at Old Palm in October. And Jackson, appreciate all the help, and we'll catch up with everybody soon.
Thank you, guys.